Alright, we are recording for chapter 20 of Pastor's Courage. I think I'd been doing pretty well with getting the right direction. Just screwed it up. Okay. Um, it is a more interesting chapter in some ways, but one thing a little frustrating is it ends in the middle of one of the more significant parts of the story. Of the history, I should say. So I will get to that, but first, the bombing. So, yeah, I'll just read how it starts. How the chapter starts. Coward came slowly to his senses. The air was full of noise. Don't put that thing there. There we go. It's that thing for like saying the column such was over the text. Don't do that. Anyway, Coward came slowly to his senses. The air was full of noise, but it was all in his head. As the singing in his ears gradually receded, other sounds crept in. Distant shouts and near shouts and near at hand a groan of pain. I really like how this paragraph is written describing this sensation. That's why I wanted to read it all. He raised himself on an elbow and found that a thick pall of dust was blowing straight into his face. A few seconds passed before he realized the front of the hut was missing. Even then, the full significance of what had happened did not dawn on him. He forced himself to his knees, then to his feet, and only a short and appalling scream snapped him into activity. Gripped with fear and horror, he stumbled over the debris of the floor and reeled outside into the dust cloud. Okay. So ultimately, it is stated 39 POWs were killed in the bombing. He goes to complain. Well, he demands an audience and complains to the factory directors, who it's mainly just one guy that responds and is basically kind of saying what I suggested could be the case before that. Well, when you people are bombing so indiscriminately, obviously some of you are going to be hit. It's like, well, you put us where you're not supposed to put us, causing it to happen. And it's like, yeah, it's like this guy just real piece of work, and also tries to intimidate Coward, because basically saying, look, I don't have the evidence. Coward figures this out, because if he did, Coward would be dead. But the guy's basically saying, I know you're the one that's been leading the sabotage. So Coward basically now knows he needs to be careful, because if they do ever get evidence on him, they will kill him. They hate him. They want him dead, but they don't have a good reason for it. So, yeah. But that's not going to stop him from still doing some stuff. So, Heki's group managed to destroy generators, right? For the factory. Well, they want the factory operational, so they bring in some generators as well and have to run a new line. They have to run a line through a ditch that the POWs have been digging. And it's like, great, let's sabotage that. Yes, okay. Already the cable reached to the conduit leading inside the camp, and the men were hard put to devise a way in which to delay completion. Then the idea came to Coward of cutting the cable as was laid and disguising the breaks with clay and dirt to pass the inspections of the German electrical engineer in charge. To their glee, this scheme carried through without a hitch. And so then they get the big wigs to come and flip the switch to turn it on, and nothing happens. And it takes them a while to figure out. Unfortunately, Coward wasn't here to witness it, but he was told later. It took them a while to figure out that the issue must have been in the cable, and it was one of those, even if they did believe Coward was behind it, so many people were involved with this. Excuse me, like so many camps even were brought in, and alright. It took weeks of patient investigation to discover the breaks, and as the work given top priority had been undertaken by parties from most of the camps, it was impossible to pin down responsibility. So basically lost in the crowd. It talks a little bit more about goings on there. Once you caught sight of Goering and Goebbels making a lightning tour of the factory, grimly inspecting the results of their handiwork, and regarding the half-dead workers around them with open contempt. They must have ordered an even greater impetus to the mass extermination conducting at Birkenau, for the damaged furnaces were speedily repaired and the numbers of the slain leapt skywards in the black and sickly smelling smoke. Perhaps in this later stage of the war, they feared too many people remembering their infamy, but in Coward, at least, they failed utterly. Let me just check my notes. So, more or less, those are just name drops, but still kind of interesting. And they actually do give another as well, with a Major Kramer, I think it was. Yes. He finally left Auschwitz at about this time for a different command, but also describes a Irma Greis. I feel like that's a name I may have learned long ago, but isn't heavily focused on, and basically she is incredibly evil, such that the way it's, well, I'll just read it. In her body dwelt vices that only the testimony on oath of some of her victims make credible. Like, she was that terrible that, yeah, it would be beyond belief. Otherwise. But, anyway, he's, going around doing his normal thing. He starts, because he's like, okay, you know what, it's been long enough, maybe we can start up the substitutes, the body substitution again to get some people to escape. And starts talking to the Unter officer that is in charge of the bodies. He's jacked up his prices. There was some lines previously that he may have been figuring out what was going on, he just didn't care. So now it's like, security's up, I know that something's going on with that. Because the heck, he's successful sabotage. So I'd be like, look, I'm gonna need more. And Coward even tried offering some of the gold that he still had. It's like, that wouldn't do it. But while this was going on, when the Jewish slaves come up and try talking to him, there is English man, Dr. Birkenau, he say me speak you. Okay. And I actually did remember one thing correctly about this, but I had mentioned before. What I remembered incorrectly was I thought that he was shot down in a plane. No, he was on a boat that was torpedoed, captured, and then put into the Birkenau, the death camp section of Auschwitz, which, no, he's a legal POW. Doesn't matter that he's a Jew. He's a legal POW. He is not to be over there. So Coward, he can't get too much information out of the guy, because the English isn't that great, and there's a capo coming over who's going to interfere with this, and indeed strikes the guy who Coward had given a potato to. The capo is starting to reach for it. Coward's response is to put his boot on the dude's hand, but then shove a bunch of cigarettes in his face to keep him from yelling out. Because that would make him incredibly wealthy, because it's not like they would have access to those otherwise. But then it's basically, okay, the next day, get me a note. Like, just write me something, that'll be easier. And it's actually funny, when he does go back the next day, he finds the work party, but he doesn't see that guy in there anymore. The capo's coming over, but it's like, fine, bribe again. Why don't you go over there? He's like, just give me some time. And it's like, as the guy's going off, Coward feels a piece of paper pushed into his hand. He turns around and is like, who? Nope, everyone's working intently. He's got no idea who it is that put it in. But, it was a strip from the edge of a newspaper yellowing with age, and he stared at the faint scrawl of a pencil stub. My name is, and there's a dash. It ran of blank Street, Sunderland, naval doctor torpedoed, Jew, separated from British prisoners, not allowed out working parties, tell authorities and family. I'm not sure if the blanks are that we don't get the name in this book, or if it is like he couldn't read it. But it's possible he was trying to protect him, which is a little funny in a way, because the name is known. This is a true story, and it's actually somewhat important, and I don't mind spoiling this much. Hang on, I just want to check. Yeah, pretty sure that's... Oh, no, that's right. So, Coward decides he can't make inquiries. Okay, he needs evidence that the guy is there. He cannot make inquiries to try to get an investigation. That's better in the frame. It's just... things get tighter up here. Because he's concerned that if he were to start trying to have any inquiries, it would actually result in the guy being found and just being killed to hide this evidence. So it's like, no, I need to actually meet him. I need to figure this out. yeah, so it's just... So what Coward is going to do is actually find one of the other Jewish inmates to swap places with him for a night to try to find the guy in the death camp portion of Auschwitz. And that guy will then get to enjoy a night in the POW portion. And he's actually... Because they talk about they have to swap clothing. How exactly no one realizes Coward is a relatively fed person compared to the walking skeletons? But one thing, though, that they are... that Coward, after they swap clothes, is more concerned with, and so is the dude he switches with, is the boots. They're so heavy that the guy is having a hard time picking up and carrying them, and just moving his legs. But anyway, coming back to this thing, Coward never actually finds the doctor in there, so they never meet. But the guy does survive, and it does actually testify at the Nuremberg trials, because him being put in there is itself a war crime. Because I said, he legally is a POW. He must be over with the POWs, but they didn't do that. In fact, even that sentence there was that he was separated from the POWs. So they took him out, which, yeah, that lots of war crimes going on. Some definitely more significant than this, but this is still a significant war crime on its own. But my understanding, it might be in the book, it might be when I looked up some things separately, because they never connected while Coward is in Auschwitz, was in the death camp portion during that night. He is not able at the trial to give testimony because neither of them can confirm that the other was there because they never met. However, Coward does, to my understanding, does give testimony in other trials about what he witnessed in there, because it's like it was one of those, we don't doubt that you were that we don't doubt that you did spend the night in there, because there would be other people that would say yes, you went over, but we can't say there was on that date that you met any of those people, things like that. So it's, but he does still give testimony in other cases, is my understanding. I believe the doctor does as well, because I mean he also was very much a witness of it. Actually, no, maybe it's possible that they wouldn't allow Coward at all to testify about what he witnessed during that night, but everything else, like, well, we know you are POW, so the things you would see just by being a POW, that you'd definitely be able to testify on. Anyway, that's for another time. So, yeah. So he's now with the Jews, and it's just, he's having to remember to try to move like them, which involves basically a shuffle, arms just hanging straight down, and head down looking at the feet of those in front of you. Eventually they go and come to a wash house. A gloomy, dank wash house, at least so we suppose, from the presence of 3 taps leaking a miserable trickle of water into slopping tin troughs. So much for it being a wash house, because there's barely any water there. Some do try, but it's why. When he actually gets to when the huts, yeah, the highlight is wrong. It should be starting a line earlier. Okay. If the general smell of the camp had sickened Coward, that inside the hut hit him like a physical blow, as his lungs sucked down the fetid air, compounded of filth and sweat and excrement. He felt a sudden panic of suffocation. He groped his way towards a broken window, braced himself against the wall, and tried to pierce the glue. There were apparently no lights. Rows of 3-tier bunks filled the hut, flimsy erections which swayed as the inmates leaned against them. He could see no furniture or blankets. So first in there, that's the reaction. And it's actually kind of funny because, for what I can recall, when I watched Schindler's List like a year and a half ago, whenever that was, the inside of those camps actually did not look as bad. Different camps, to be fair, but the way it's described here does sound worse. But continuing, and by the way, some of this, it gets worse in the next chapter, because basically when he falls asleep is when the chapter ends, and he does wake up as well in the morning, and that's in chapter 21. Some of that, yeah, it yeah, I'll leave it for now. But anyway, so now two guards, and maybe one of the capos, I don't quite remember, but at least two guards come in to now provide the ration of food, which is a soup of unknown composition. The ration was evidently one bowl between 6 men. No sooner had each group drawn their portion than Bedlam seized the hut. Because I'm saying one between 6 men, that's obviously not enough, so they're all scrambling to try to get something. Coward doesn't involve himself in this. Probably isn't that hungry. But is also, I mean, who would want to interfere with that if you're not desperate? And the guards, I mean, because they're fighting over the bowls, trying to get the guard. When the guard decides to have some fun by just kicking one of them, that sends them sprawling, sends them quite a bit back. But also, he ends up spilling the soup on the floor, so everyone's upset. But that the Nazi bastard there is just being a bully. He wants that reaction, so. But we also get a little bit more here. On leaving the factory and again before entering the camp, Coward's gang had been counted. Now he could realize only too well why the slaves were often reputed to hold up the bodies of the dead comrades during these parades. Where food was so terribly meager, no method was to be spurned for getting a little extra allocation. At some point, I do want to see Weekend at Bernie's. I've never seen it. But there is that image. And that's a community thing of like trying to hold up the dead body between two guys. No, they were doing that because if the number was higher, there'd be more food. Which also meant that they were carrying that dead body into these huts. That I would then assume in the morning they would just leave it there, it would be collected as part of the dead. So it's only one meal, but still you're having to sleep around dead people. The dead bodies. But then also how the smell is described, maybe you wouldn't even notice it that much. Regardless. I highlighted that one. It's the large highlight in the middle there. Because the things you have to do to survive in some cases, but fuck, this is a situation no one should have to be in. After dinner, they then come out, and a crowd of 1,000 men have been crammed into this area outside of the hut. Behind it, the group, in the mud, a pole stretched across a noisome pit. This latrine proved to be the ablution, so the place where you could clean yourself off, and it's just a pole across a pit. A noisome pit at that, so yeah. And 1,000 people, but only a 15-minute period allowed out there. When that time was up, they start running in, and Coward doesn't really run after, and he doesn't really know why. When he gets in there, he realizes why, because it's now time for sleep. And they were rushing in to potentially get on a bunk, which they squeeze in as tight as they can on the bunks, like 3 to 8 each level on the bunk, which I think it said they were triple bunks as well, so that's 9 to a single one of these things that are so flimsy that it sways when these very emaciated people lean against them. So yeah, but then he also does realize, where's everyone else sleeping? Well, on the floor. So just him walking through, he's bumping into people and actually like trying to feel around. He's brushing against their heads and faces. Finally, he realizes that a group of them that are all like seated down and just in like hunched like that, they must be leaning against the wall. So eventually he just manages to make a hole for himself and leans down there and shuts his eyes. But lowered himself and sat with his knees under his chin, resting his head on his arms. The animal chorus of wheezes and groans receded in his exhausted brain. Suddenly he snapped awake. Something moved over his hair. He brushed it off, and a bony hand fell on his knee. Thrusting it away, he struggled to keep down the bile in his mouth. Dear God, he prayed, get me out of this. Only get me out of this. But the night was just beginning. And that's how the chapter ends. It's a hell of an ending. And it is like, well, I'm going to be being 21 now. But yeah, I do remember some of it. Like, the bowls I were mentioned for the soup, they come into play again. And there will be some other stuff. We do also, by the way, get some story as to the Jewish slave that he had traded places with and spending time with the POW camp. We do get told some about what happens with him. He has a grand old time. It doesn't matter that none of them speak the language of the other. It's great, but yeah, so we'll have the details of that next. Yeah, I kind of do want to get to it, so I guess, and I don't really have anything to add other than, man, I wish it were all in one chapter. So it's like I wouldn't be taking this break here to record the video, but it's how they cut it up, so it is what it is. It's building tension. But yeah, and it's as much as I told you, there was still more in this than I've said. And I'm certain that will also be true of the next chapter as well, where there will be stuff I won't share because, like, there's other more significant points, but they're all there and potentially worthy of considering. Like how it also described when putting on the striped pajamas. He described that putting them on, he still felt naked. They were that thin. They were that flimsy. That insignificant compared to the clothing he had just taken off. And that the slave putting them on, to him, it must have felt like being in a dream to have them on because they, were of actual stock and quality, compared to what he had been wearing for however long. So, all right, see you in 21.